Melbourne, and reporter Dana Morse joins me now. Dana, what's the latest?
Good afternoon. The latest, as you said, is there has been another person in aged care test positive for coronavirus. What we know is that the resident is 89 years old and was the cousin of the already known positive case from aged care at Arcare in Maidstone, and that they had adjoining rooms. Now, this man was fully vaccinated, but as we know, you are not completely covered by both doses of vaccine until up to 14 days after you receive that second dose. We don't know when this man was vaccinated, and we'll be looking to find that out later. So the government has announced earlier today that the lockdown here in Melbourne will continue, and if there are no cases in regional Victoria, then they will see an easing of restrictions from 11:59 tomorrow night. Here in Greater Melbourne, there will be some changes to the lockdown restrictions. You'll be able to go 10 kilometres from your home. That's up from a previous of 5, and we'll see Year 11 and 12 students able to return to face-to-face learning. Some businesses will also be able to reopen if they're doing predominantly outside work. So that's looking at things like landscaping, maintenance and house painting, and that will be a little bit of relief for those industries. Health authorities are particularly concerned about the level of exposure sites that we have here in Victoria, and that's likely why the lockdown has been extended 7 days in Greater Melbourne. We are seeing over 360 exposure sites across the state, some in some regional areas, including Euroa and Anglesea. And of course, there was the family that holidayed on New South Wales South Coast, and there have been a number of exposure sites identified there. We are waiting on the genomic sequencing to identify whether or not that family will be linked to this outbreak that is part of the leak from South Australian hotel quarantine. We're expecting to get that data back in the next 24 hours or so. But the challenge then remains to find out where exactly this family picked it up, and it's not something that contact tracers have been able to identify so far. Now, health authorities are concerned about the level of transmissibility of this virus, and that's why it may not be clear where some people have picked it up from as yet, as we're looking at the Kappa variant, as you mentioned before. For that reason, even if restrictions ease here in Greater Melbourne in the next 7 days, we won't see any movement between Greater Melbourne and the regional areas until after the Queen's birthday weekend at least, and the government made that clear this afternoon.
At the end of another 7 days, we do expect to be in a position to carefully ease restrictions in Melbourne, but there will continue to be differences between the settings in Melbourne compared to regional Victoria. So I want to be upfront with people that even if all goes well, we won't be able to have people from Melbourne travelling to regional Victoria during the Queen's birthday long weekend. The risk of exporting this virus is just too high.
So this is the news local businesses did not want to hear, Dana. What did the acting Premier say about that?
Well, the acting Premier did say for those regional tourism and accommodation businesses that we can expect to see some kind of support package that they'll unveil in the next couple of days. But for businesses, they've already announced a $250 million support package, and that was on Sunday. Today, they announced an additional $209 million going towards that support package. Now, that package will mean that businesses in both Greater Melbourne and the regional areas can apply for grants to help cover some of their expenses during the lockdown period. We understand that in the regional areas, they'll be able to apply for the 7 days that they've been in lockdown, and say a regional business might be eligible for a $3,000 grant in the regional areas. Because the lockdown is going to be twice as long in the Greater Melbourne area, that amount will double. So that's been unveiled today from the state government. But what we are yet to see is any kind of wage subsidy for the workers that are being affected by this lockdown. The state government have said they've been trying to get in touch with their federal counterparts to raise the issue again of Victorian workers needing some kind of JobKeeper program to get them through this lockdown. But we haven't heard anything yet from the federal government as to whether they'll be stepping up to deliver that. And the acting Premier had a bit to say on that.
I'll be speaking with the Prime Minister We need to see this support. We have stepped up to the plate supporting businesses. The federal government needs to do exactly the same thing.
But do you get the sense they're actually going to do that? Because they were saying blanket no on Sunday. Has that changed?
Well, that's a question for the federal government, Raf. That is what we are absolutely putting to the Morrison government. Victorian businesses absolutely are devastated by this lockdown, as are families and communities. They need support. And the support we're providing is bigger and broader than the support we provided in the February lockdown, but we need the federal government to deliver on what they are responsible for, and that is around wage subsidies.
So there'll be quite a few casual and contract workers here in Victoria that will be keeping a very keen eye and ear on those discussions to see if they're going to become eligible for any kind of wage subsidy or support program. But what we need to stop this lockdown from progressing or from lockdowns occurring again and again is to raise the rate of vaccination in the community. The Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, said today that we need 75% of the adult population to be vaccinated here in Victoria to have real protection from this virus leaking into the community again. To put that in context, we are currently at 2%. So there is a lot of work to be done there, and Victorians have been rolling up their sleeves to go and get the jab since this lockdown was announced, and we would need to see those testing numbers and those vaccination numbers remain high in order to ensure community safety.
Dana Morse reporting from Melbourne.